A thug drags a young waitress by her hair down a busy Chinatown street, slamming her bloodied head against a parked car while bystanders scatter in terror. The brutal attacker and his crew laugh as they publicly humiliate the helpless girl, threatening every business owner watching from their windows. But the calm older man stepping out of the shadows isn't just another frightened witness. This is Jackie Chan himself. The street punk has no idea he just assaulted an innocent woman in front of a martial arts master who spent decades perfecting the art of destroying bullies with precision and grace. While the thug boasts about his dominance over the neighborhood, the legendary action hero approaches with that deadly calm his enemies learned to fear. The waitress recognizes her savior through her tears, knowing justice moves on swift feet. The punk's crew keeps watching, thinking they're about to see another victim, but they're actually witnessing their leader's introduction to real power. What happens when street trash meets a living legend who never learned to back down? Will the bully survive, discovering why some heroes never retire? What happened next would terrorize the thug for the rest of his pathetic existence. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jenny Morrison's sneakers squeaked against the wet pavement as she hurried toward the Golden Dragon restaurant, her nursing textbook clutched against her chest like armor. The digital clock on her phone read 5:28 a.m., and Mrs. Chun would be waiting for her morning kanji in exactly 32 minutes. Jenny had learned that punctuality wasn't just professional courtesy in Chinatown. It was respect the streets held, that peculiar quiet that comes just before a neighborhood awakens. Delivery trucks rumbled in the distance, and the first commuters emerged from apartment buildings with steaming coffee cups. Jenny loved these early morning moments when the world felt manageable, when her exhaustion from studying until 2 a.m. seemed worth it for the dream of pediatric nursing that kept her moving forward. Her phone buzzed with another missed call from her landlord. Rent was due in 3 days, and she was $47 short even after working doubles all week. The mathematics of poverty never added up, no matter how many hours she sacrificed to the equation. The Golden Dragon's familiar red door welcomed her with its brass knocker shaped like a protective lion. Mr. Wong was already inside, counting yesterday's meager receipts with the careful attention of a man who understood that every dollar mattered. His weathered face brightened when she entered, the worry lines softening into something resembling fatherly affection. "Jenny, you look tired again," he said in his gentle voice, not looking up from the register. "Maybe you study too much?" She tied her apron with practiced efficiency, checking that her order pad and pen were secure in the front pocket. "I'm fine, Mr. Wong. Just need coffee." The morning regulars began arriving like clockwork. Mrs. Chin shuffled in at exactly 6, her cane tapping a familiar rhythm against the linoleum, ready to share new stories about her grandson's achievements in medical school. Robert Martinez, the businessman who tipped generously but never made eye contact, claimed his usual corner booth and immediately buried himself in his phone. Pete Kowalski, the delivery driver with kind eyes and calloused hands, flirted harmlessly while downing his third cup of coffee. Jenny moved between the tables with practiced grace, remembering everyone's preferences without being asked. Mrs. Chin's kanji with extra ginger. Martinez's black coffee, no sugar, with his egg sandwich cut diagonally. Pete's coffee light and sweet, with a side of hash browns that he'd share with anyone who looked hungry. "Business has been slow," Mr. Wong confided during a quiet moment, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken worry. "Some customers, they stop coming. Say the neighborhood feels dangerous now." Jenny had noticed the changes too. Broken windows that stayed boarded up longer than they should. Shop owners who locked their doors earlier each evening. An undercurrent of tension that made people walk faster and avoid eye contact with strangers as the lunch rush approached. 3 men in leather jackets entered and claimed the window table. They didn't order anything, just sat watching the street with predatory patience. The tallest one, with dirty blonde hair and cold blue eyes, made direct eye contact with Jenny and smiled in a way that made her skin crawl. Mr. Wong appeared beside her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Those men, they come around asking for money. Say they protect businesses from trouble." His hands trembled slightly as he wiped down an already clean counter. "I tell them no, but The blond man pointed directly at Jenny before standing to leave, his smile never wavering. The lunch shift continued, but the atmosphere had shifted, like storm clouds gathering on what had been a clear day. 2 blocks away. In a modest studio above Lynn's herbal medicine shop, an older Asian man in simple clothes demonstrated a defensive kata for 6 children aged 7 to 12. The worn mats beneath their feet had seen thousands of hours of practice, and the mirrors reflected movements that flowed like water over stone. "Remember, Tommy," the instructor said gently, adjusting 8-year-old Tommy Nakamura's stance with patient hands. "Martial arts is not about fighting. It's about protecting what matters most." The children called him Mr. Lee, and they hung on his every word with the devotion that only comes from finding an adult who truly sees them. Tommy, small for his age and shy by nature, straightened his shoulders under his teacher's encouraging touch. Lisa Torres, 10 years old with bright eyes and endless questions, practiced her blocks with determined precision. "We train so we never have to use these skills," Mr. Lee continued, his voice carrying the wisdom of decades. "But if we must protect ourselves or others, we use only what is necessary, never more." Between classes, he helped Mrs. Lin organize her extensive collection of herbs, speaking fluent Cantonese with the elderly customers who treated him with deep respect. His movements while arranging bottles and measuring remedies showed the same fluid precision he displayed during martial arts instruction, every gesture purposeful, every motion economical. When he demonstrated advanced techniques for the older students, something extraordinary emerged. His blocks seemed impossibly fast, his kicks stopped precisely 1 inch from their targets, and his footwork suggested a level of training far beyond what a neighborhood instructor should possess. The children watched in awed silence as he moved through forms that looked more like dancing than fighting. "Mr. Lee," Lisa asked after a particularly impressive demonstration, "where did you learn to move like that?" He smiled, but something flickered behind his eyes, a carefully guarded secret. "From many teachers, over many years. The most important lesson is always the same. True strength protects the weak." As the evening class ended, parents arrived to collect their children, bowing respectfully to Mr. Lee before departing. Mrs. Lin brought him tea in a delicate porcelain cup, settling beside him with the comfortable familiarity of old friendship. "There are troubles in the neighborhood," she said quietly in Cantonese. "Young thugs bothering the businesses. Perhaps it's time to remind them that Chinatown has protectors." Mr. Lee sipped his tea thoughtfully, watching the last students practice their forms in the fading light. "I came here for peace, Mrs. Lin, but sometimes peace must be defended." He locked the studio with the same careful attention he gave everything else, checking the windows and ensuring the traditional weapons mounted on the walls were secure. The evening air carried the sense of a dozen different cuisines and the distant hum of traffic, but underneath it all was something else, a tension that made the shadows seem deeper. His evening walk home would take him past the Golden Dragon restaurant, the same route he'd followed for months without incident. Tonight felt different, though he couldn't yet say why. Perhaps it was Mrs. Lin's words about protectors, or the way the children had looked at him during his demonstration, as if they sensed he was more than he appeared. The streets of Chinatown held their secrets close, but some secrets couldn't remain hidden forever. The apartment above the pawn shop reeked of stale beer and cigarettes, the air thick with the kind of desperation that comes from easy money earned through hard violence. Derek Sullivan sat at a card table scarred with knife marks and cigarette burns, counting protection money with the methodical attention of a man who understood that respect was measured in dollars and fear. Rick Stone and Bobby Valdez flanked him like loyal dogs, reporting the day's collections with the enthusiasm of employees hoping for approval. Rick, 26 and built like a bouncer, had the dead eyes of someone who'd stopped feeling guilt years ago. Bobby, younger and still uncomfortable with the worst of their business, shifted nervously as he spoke. "The dry cleaner paid up," Rick reported, dropping a crumpled envelope on the table. "But that old Chinese lady with the herb shop still says no. And the restaurant owner, Wong, he's being stubborn too." Derek's cold blue eyes lit up with cruel interest. He'd grown bored with simple extortion, craving the rush that came from escalating stakes. Breaking windows and roughing up shop owners had lost its thrill. He needed something that would establish his dominance permanently, something that would be remembered. Tell me about this restaurant, Derek said, leaning back in his chair. What makes Wong think he can tell us no? There's a girl who works there, Bobby said reluctantly. Young, pretty, works alone most nights, takes the bus home. After closing, Derek's smile widened, revealing teeth stained yellow from years of chain smoking. Fear is temporary, boys. But humiliation? That lasts forever. We make an example that keeps giving lessons. Bobby's discomfort was obvious, but Derek cut off any objection before it could form. You getting soft on me, Bobby? This isn't charity. Work. These people need to learn respect, and sometimes the best teacher is pain. Derek stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street where normal people went about their normal lives, oblivious to the predator watching from above. He'd built his crew through intimidation and shared brutality, offering protection from problems he created himself. But lately, the neighborhood had shown signs of resistance that needed to be crushed. Here's what we're going to do, Derek announced, turning back to his men. We grab the waitress. Publicly. Make sure everyone sees what happens when businesses don't pay for protection. Use her as leverage against every shop on the block. Rick nodded eagerly, but Bobby remained silent, staring at the floor. Problem with that plan, Bobby? Derek's voice carried a dangerous edge. No problem, Bobby muttered. Just seems like a lot of heat for one protection payment. Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. This isn't about money anymore. This is about respect. About showing every business owner in Chinatown what happens when they forget their place. He checked his watch, 9:30 p.m. The Golden Dragon closed at 10, and according to his reconnaissance, the girl always left alone through the back alley, counting her tips before heading to the bus stop. Predictable patterns made for easy targets. Time to teach this neighborhood a lesson they'll never forget, Derek said, cracking his knuckles with anticipation. When we're done tonight, every business owner in Chinatown will be begging to pay us. None of them knew they were about to encounter someone whose entire life had been built on protecting the innocent from predators exactly like them. The last customer left Golden Dragon at 9:47 p.m., and Ginny began the familiar ritual of closing. She wiped down tables with methodical efficiency, while Mr. Wong counted the day's receipts, both of them moving through routines perfected over months of working together. You did good work today, Ginny, Mr. Wong said, his voice heavy with worry. But those men this morning. He handed her the day's tips, $23 for 12 hours of work. Maybe you should take tomorrow off. Let things settle down. Ginny looked at the crumpled bills in her hand, calculating rent, groceries, and textbooks with the desperate mathematics of someone living paycheck to paycheck. I need the hours, Mr. Wong. I'll be careful. He wanted to argue. She could see it in his eyes, but he understood necessity better than most. Instead, he pressed an extra $10 bill into her palm. For taxi home. No bus tonight. She wanted to refuse. He couldn't afford the gesture any more than she could, but the fear in his voice made her nod. Except when she stepped into the alley and counted her money under the flickering streetlight, she realized she still didn't have enough for cab fare to her apartment across town. The alley felt different tonight. Too quiet, with shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. Ginny quickened her pace toward the street, her sneakers splashing through puddles left by the afternoon rain. The familiar sounds of Chinatown at night, distant traffic, muffled conversations, the occasional siren, felt muted, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Footsteps echoed behind her, matching her rhythm too precisely to be coincidence. When she turned, Derek Sullivan stepped out of the shadows with Rick and Bobby flanking him like wolves cornering prey. Well, Derek said, his voice casual and friendly in a way that made it infinitely more terrifying. The little waitress who thinks she's too good to show respect. Ginny backed against the brick wall, clutching her purse with white knuckles. I don't have any money. Please just let me go home. Derek laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, sweetheart, this isn't about money anymore. This is about sending a message to every business owner in this neighborhood. He nodded to Rick, who grabbed Ginny's arm with practiced brutality. When she struggled, Derek's backhand across her face came so fast she barely saw it. Pain exploded through her skull, and the taste of blood filled her mouth. Now you're going to help us teach Mr. Wong and all his friends about respect. Derek's fingers tangled in her hair, and suddenly she was being dragged from the alley toward The main street. The asphalt scraped her knees through her jeans, and her screams echoed off the buildings like a siren call for help that wouldn't come. This is what happens when businesses don't pay for protection. Derek shouted to anyone within earshot, his voice carrying the manic excitement of someone who'd found the perfect stage for his cruelty. Jenny's vision blurred with tears and pain as Derek slammed her against a parked car. The window cracked under the impact, and she felt something warm trickling down her forehead. Other pedestrians hurried past with downcast eyes, and shop owners peered fearfully from behind curtains before quickly disappearing. This was Derek's neighborhood now, a place where predators ruled and good people hid in the shadows. Jenny closed her eyes and waited for whatever came next, unaware that salvation was already approaching with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime turning the tables on bullies. Lee walked peacefully down Grand Avenue, enjoying the cool evening air and the familiar sounds of Chinatown settling into night. His mind wandered to tomorrow's lesson plan. Perhaps he could better explain the concept of soft defeating hard by using water as an example. The children always understood metaphors better than abstract philosophy. The tranquil moment shattered when a woman's scream pierced the night air. His peaceful demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by the alert focus of a predator suddenly awakened. Every sense heightened as he moved toward the sound, his footsteps silent despite his quickened pace. Years of training had taught him to assess threats before exposing himself, but the desperation in that scream demanded immediate action. Rounding the corner, he saw them clearly. 3 men surrounding a young woman in the middle of the street. The largest one, blonde and vicious, had her by the hair while his companions watched for witnesses. The girl's knees were scraped bloody from being dragged across asphalt, her restaurant uniform torn and stained. Lee's tactical mind processed the scene with mechanical precision. 3 attackers, 1 victim, multiple escape routes, nearest police station 12 blocks away. But there was no time for authorities, not when innocent blood was already flowing. This is what happens when businesses don't pay for protection, the blonde man shouted, slamming the girl against a parked car hard enough to crack the window. Other pedestrians scattered like leaves before a storm, afraid to intervene. Lee stepped into the street, his voice carrying absolute authority despite its calm tone. Release the girl. Derek looked up, genuinely surprised. Here was this ordinary-looking older man in simple clothes, speaking like he expected to be obeyed. The contrast between his mild appearance and commanding presence was so jarring that Derek actually paused. Walk away, old man. Derek snarled, recovering his composure. Before you get hurt worse than she is. Mr. Lee took another measured step forward, his hands relaxed at his sides, but his stance subtly shifting into something that hadn't been seen on these streets in decades. The change was so slight that most people would miss it, but to trained eyes, it was like watching a sleeping dragon begin to stir. I will ask once more, Mr. Lee said quietly. Release her. Derek's laughter died in his throat as something in the older man's eyes suggested this wasn't going to unfold according to his usual script. There was no fear there, no uncertainty, only the patient confidence of someone who had faced worse threats than 3 street thugs and emerged victorious. The girl whimpered as Derek's grip tightened in her hair, but her eyes found Mr. Lee's face through her tears. Something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, or simply the desperate hope of someone who had run out of options finding an unexpected champion. Rick and Bobby spread out to flank the stranger, but Mr. Lee remained perfectly still in the center of the street, waiting. He had learned long ago that the first move often determined the entire fight, and patience was frequently the greatest weapon of all. The confrontation balanced on a knife's edge, 3 against 1. With an innocent life hanging in the balance, Derek shoved Jenny aside, letting her collapse against the car as he focused on this unexpected challenge. You picked the wrong night to play hero, Grandpa. His voice carried the lazy confidence of someone accustomed to intimidating opponents through size and reputation alone. Rick and Bobby moved to flank Mr. Lee, who remained perfectly still in the center of the street. Years of coordinated attacks had taught them that overwhelming force usually ended resistance before it could begin. Most people backed down when faced with 3-to-1 odds. Derek threw a wild haymaker, confident that his size and youth would overwhelm this delusional senior. Citizen. The punch carried all his weight behind it, aimed to end the fight with one devastating blow. Mr. Lee moved like water. The punch missed by inches as he flowed around Derek's attack with impossible grace, his response coming so fast it seemed supernatural. A precise palm strike to Derek's solar plexus lifted the larger man off his feet and sent him stumbling backward, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Lucky shot, Derek wheezed, but his voice lacked conviction. No one had ever hit him that hard, and certainly not someone who looked like a neighborhood shop owner. Rick charged from the left, swinging a tire iron with the kind of vicious enthusiasm that had served him well in dozens of street fights. The weapon whistled through the air toward Mr. Lee's skull, carrying enough force to crack bone. Mr. Lee's response was a blur of controlled violence. He deflected the tire iron with his forearm, an impact that should have shattered bone but somehow didn't, stepped inside Rick's guard, and delivered an uppercut that lifted Rick completely off his feet. The tire iron clattered away as Rick crumpled to the asphalt, unconscious before he hit the ground. Bobby, seeing his partners neutralized with surgical precision, pulled a switchblade and began circling cautiously. The casual brutality he'd witnessed countless times before had been replaced by something else entirely, a level of skill that belonged in movies, not on real streets. "I don't want to hurt you," Mr. Lee said quietly, his focus split between Bobby and Derek, who was struggling to his feet with murder in his eyes. "But I will not allow you to harm innocent people." Derek, rage overcoming caution, pulled his own knife and lunged with the desperate fury of someone whose worldview had just been shattered. What followed was 30 seconds of the most precise combat ever witnessed on these streets. Mr. Lee moved like poetry written in violence. He disarmed both men with techniques that seemed to defy physics, using their own momentum against them, never striking harder than necessary, never causing permanent damage when temporary would suffice. Derek found himself face down on the asphalt, his knife skittering into a storm drain, Bobby unconscious beside him. Sirens wailed in the distance as Derek struggled to his feet, blood trickling from his nose. His crew was down, his weapons were gone, and this old man wasn't even breathing hard. "This isn't over," Derek snarled, helping Rick to his feet while Bobby remained motionless. "I'm gonna burn this whole fucking block down, starting with that girl." They stumbled toward their car, leaving behind the shattered remains of their reputation and Derek's first taste of real defeat. Mr. Lee knelt beside Jenny, checking her injuries with the practiced attention of someone familiar with trauma. "Are you hurt badly? Can you stand?" Jenny stared at him through tears and shock, her mind struggling to process what she'd just witnessed. "I'm okay, just scared. But you? How did you do that? Who are you?" A small crowd had gathered now that the immediate danger had passed, emerging from doorways and around corners like flowers blooming after a storm. Mrs. Lin appeared from her herb shop with a first aid kit, muttering urgently in rapid Cantonese while examining Jenny's cuts and bruises. Old Mr. Chun from the corner newsstand stared at Mr. Lee with growing recognition, his weathered face creasing into an expression of disbelief. "The way you moved? I've seen those techniques before. In movies, yes, but also." He trailed off, uncertain whether to voice his suspicions. Mrs. Lin cleaned Jenny's wounds while whispering to other shop owners in Cantonese, her voice carrying an excitement that transcended language barriers. The name Jackie Chan passed between them like electricity, spoken in hushed tones of reverence and amazement. Jenny noticed the way they looked at her rescuer, not like a neighborhood martial arts instructor, but like someone whose legend had just walked out of the screen and onto their street. "They know who you are, don't they?" she asked quietly. Mr. Lee helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they walked toward his studio. "You shouldn't be alone tonight. Those men will be back, and next time they'll bring friends." The small procession moved through Chinatown's narrow streets, growing larger as word spread from shop to shop. Elderly residents emerged to get a glimpse of the man who had done what seemed impossible, while younger people pulled out phones to capture proof of what they'd witnessed. Inside the martial arts studio, Jenny sat on a bench while Mr. Lee prepared tea with the same careful attention he gave everything else. The walls were covered with certificates and photographs, most turned face down or covered with cloth, as if someone had deliberately hidden a past too famous to display. Jenny's eyes found one uncovered photograph of a younger Mr. Lee standing with other martial artists she recognized from movies. Her breath caught as the pieces finally assembled themselves into an impossible truth. "You're him, aren't you?" she whispered. "You're Jackie Chan." Mr. Lee, Jackie, set down his teacup and met her eyes directly for the first time. Suddenly, he looked every one of his 52 years, the weight of decades of fame and its aftermath settling across his shoulders like a visible burden. "I came to Chinatown seeking peace," he said quietly. "A quiet life teaching children, helping Mrs. Lin with her herbs, being useful without being famous." He paused, studying her face for judgment that didn't come. "But I will not stand by while innocent people suffer." Jenny felt the magnitude of what had just happened settling around her. Jackie Chan, the Jackie Chan, had just saved her life. But more than that, he'd chosen to reveal himself to protect a stranger, abandoning the anonymity that had given him peace. "Those men tonight," Jackie continued, "they're not just street thugs. What they did to you was a declaration of war on this entire community." Dawn light filtered through the studio windows as Jackie moved through a slow, meditative kata, his body flowing through forms perfected over decades of practice. Jenny slept fitfully on a cot in the corner, having been too frightened to return to her apartment after the attack. The morning revealed the studio's true nature: traditional weapons mounted with respect rather than decoration, training equipment worn smooth by countless hours of use, and photographs of Jackie with martial arts masters whose names were legend. This wasn't just a neighborhood school. It was a sanctuary where one of the world's greatest action stars had tried to find peace. Derek hadn't slept either, but his night had been spent making phone calls and calling in favors. The humiliation of being defeated by an old man had consumed him completely, but learning his attacker's true identity had transformed humiliation into opportunity. "Do you know what kind of reputation I'll have when word gets out that I took down Jackie fucking Chan?" Derek's voice crackled through Bobby's phone, manic with possibilities. He'd contacted Frank Kowalski, a brutal enforcer with connections to larger criminal organizations, painting visions of the publicity and respect that would come from breaking a legend. Frank had been skeptical at first, but Derek's pitch was seductive. "Every punk in the city will want to work for the guy who destroyed Jackie Chan. We're not talking about some washed-up actor. We're talking about taking down an icon." As Jackie's first children's class prepared to begin at 2 p.m., Derek's crew arrived like a plague. They didn't attack directly. That would be too simple, too quick. Instead, they vandalized the studio's entrance with methodical precision, spray painting threats in blood-red letters across the windows. When parents arrived with their children, they found broken glass crunching underfoot and a message that froze their hearts: "Jackie Chan dies tonight. Anyone who helps him dies too." Tommy Nakamura clung to his mother's hand, his 8-year-old mind struggling to understand why someone would want to hurt his beloved teacher. Lisa Torres pressed against her father's leg, her usual brightness dimmed by fear. She was too young to fully comprehend Mrs. Lin emerged from her shop below, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks as she surveyed the destruction. The respect and safety she'd helped build in this community was crumbling before her eyes. "I'm sorry," Jackie told the gathered parents, his voice heavy with responsibility he hadn't asked for but couldn't abandon. "Please keep your children home until this is over." But even as he spoke the words, Jackie knew that Derek had escalated beyond simple intimidation. The broken glass and spray-painted threats weren't just attacks on him. They were declarations of war against everyone he cared about. Mrs. Lin approached him as the last family departed, her voice steady despite her tears. "My grandson Tommy loves your classes, says you teach him to be brave but not mean. If we don't fight now, what kind of world do we leave for the children?" Through the broken windows, they could see Derek's expanded crew taking positions around the block, no longer hiding their intentions. The siege of Chinatown had begun, and Jackie faced an impossible choice: flee and abandon the community that had given him peace, or stay and watch innocent people suffer for his presence. The war for Chinatown's soul was about to begin. Jenny swept broken glass from the studio floor while parents hurriedly collected their children's belongings, their faces torn between sympathy and fear. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the community grappled with an impossible situation: stand with Jackie and risk everything, or abandon him to save themselves. "This is your fault," snapped Mrs. Nakamura, Tommy's mother, her voice shaking, with barely controlled panic. "My son was safe before you brought this violence here." Other parents nodded in agreement, their protective instincts overriding any gratitude they might have felt. But Mr. Wong stepped forward, his arms still in a sling from the previous night's attack. "Those men were terrorizing us long before Jackie arrived. At least now we have someone willing to fight back." Mrs. Lin nodded emphatically, switching between Cantonese and broken English as she addressed the group. "My herb shop they already try to destroy. Jackie save us from getting worse." The community split into factions right there in the studio. Some blamed Jackie for escalating the situation. Others supported him but were too frightened to help openly, and a small core of business owners had decided they were tired of living in fear. Pete Kowalski arrived unexpectedly, still wearing his delivery uniform. "My brother Bobby came home last night talking about how he's done with Derek's bullshit," he announced, surprising everyone. "Says you had every chance to seriously hurt them, but held back. That's not what Derek's telling everyone else." Jenny refused to leave despite Jackie's gentle urging, organizing the cleanup effort and helping board up the broken windows. As she worked, she revealed more about Derek's escalating pattern of violence. "He's been targeting women specifically for months," she said, hammer in hand as she secured plywood. "Uses sexual violence as a weapon of intimidation. What he did, to me, was just the beginning of something much worse." Jackie listened grimly while sweeping debris, recognizing the tactical implications. Derek wasn't just a street thug anymore. He was someone who understood psychological warfare and the power of fear to control entire communities. Maria Santos, who owned the corner market, spoke up suddenly. "My daughter goes to school with these children. If we don't stop this now, what happens when she's walking home alone?" As evening approached, the small group of supporters who remained gathered in the studio. Jackie faced them with the weight of leadership he'd never wanted. "I cannot ask you to risk your families for my fight. But this man Derek won't stop with me. He'll keep hurting innocent people until someone stops him." Mrs. Lin's voice carried the wisdom of her 70 years. "My grandson Tommy, he loves your classes. Says you teach him to be brave, but not mean. If we don't fight now, what kind of world we leave for children?" The group began planning their defense with limited resources and unlimited determination. But outside, Derek's expanded crew was already positioning themselves around the block, transforming peaceful Chinatown into a war zone. Through the boarded windows, they could see shadows moving in doorways and the glow of cigarettes marking sentry positions. The siege had begun, and morning felt very far away. The upscale restaurant across town buzzed with the quiet conversations of politicians and criminals who understood that power was just another commodity to be traded. Derek sat across from Frank Kowalski, watching the enforcer study Jackie's filmography on his phone with professional interest. "So you're telling me," Frank said slowly, "that you want to go to war with someone who makes a living falling off buildings and fighting 20 guys at once?" Derek leaned forward eagerly, his manic energy barely contained. "The man I fought last night wasn't the Jackie Chan from the movies. He's older, slower, probably can't take the hits he used to. This is our chance to make history." Frank remained skeptical until Derek explained the bigger picture. Jackie Chan represented something larger than one washed-up actor. He was a symbol of heroism that needed to be destroyed publicly and completely. "When word gets out that we broke Jackie Chan, every punk in the city will want to work for us. Fear and respect, Frank. That's what builds empires." The conversation shifted when Derek mentioned the human trafficking potential. Chinatown had everything they needed: a steady flow of undocumented workers, young women in vulnerable positions, families too afraid to contact authorities, and now a perfect cover story about gang violence to explain any disappearances. "We're not just talking about protection money anymore," Derek continued, his voice taking on the persuasive tone of a born predator. "We're talking about a full-service operation. Import, export, specialty inventory for discriminating customers." Frank's interest was clearly piqued. The protection racket was small-time compared to the profits from human trafficking, and Chinatown's isolated community would provide perfect cover for moving people without attracting attention. Councilman Bradley arrived fashionably late, his expensive suit and political smile masking a corruption that ran bone deep. He'd been taking bribes to keep police response slow in Chinatown for months, but Derek's proposition offered much larger payoffs. Jackie Chan has no official status, Bradley revealed with bureaucratic precision. No permits for his martial arts school, technically no legal right to even be in the country long term. One call to immigration, and your problem disappears. Frank agreed to the partnership with calculated enthusiasm, but his conditions were non-negotiable. Derek would handle street-level intimidation, Frank would provide muscle and organizational expertise, and Bradley would keep authorities at bay until their operation was fully established. But if Jackie Chan turns out to be more than you can handle, Frank warned, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd survived by eliminating weak links. I'm cutting our losses and selling you out to whoever pays best. Derek laughed with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real opposition. The man I fought last night was just a washed-up actor playing hero. By tomorrow night, he'll be begging us to let him leave town. Frank made a phone call that brought 12 professional criminals toward Chinatown within the hour. These weren't street thugs. They were experienced killers who understood how to hurt people efficiently and disappear without leaving evidence. The small community defense Jackie had organized was about to face overwhelming force, and none of them understood the true scope of what they were fighting against. A Jackie studio had been transformed into an impromptu training center where desperation met determination. 6 community volunteers, Mr. Wong, Mrs. Lin, Pete Kowalski, Maria Santos, student David Kim, and elderly veteran Frank Murphy, gathered around their unlikely instructor with the grim focus of people preparing for war. We are not trying to become warriors, Jackie explained, demonstrating basic defensive techniques with patient precision. We are learning to protect ourselves and each other until help arrives. He showed Jenny how to break free from someone grabbing her hair. The same situation she'd faced the night before. The technique was simple but effective. Grab the attacker's wrist, step into them to reduce leverage, then twist and escape. Jenny practiced the movement until muscle memory began to replace panic. For Mr. Wong, Jackie demonstrated how a restaurant tray could become both shield and weapon. You know this better than any soldier, Jackie said, placing the tray in Wong's good hand. Use what you understand, balance, timing, the weight of familiar objects. Mrs. Lin learned pressure points that could disable an attacker without permanent harm. Her small fingers found the spots where nerves clustered close to bone, where properly applied pressure could drop a much larger opponent. The training session was interrupted when Bobby Valdez arrived, bloodied and panicked. Pete's brother had clearly been beaten, his face swollen and his hands shaking as he spoke. Derek's planning something big tonight, Bobby gasped, accepting tea from Mrs. Lin with grateful hands. Multiple locations, simultaneous attacks. He wants to spread you thin, make you choose who to save. Bobby revealed Derek's strategy with the reluctant honesty of someone who'd finally seen too much. 5 businesses, the studio, and Jenny's apartment. 7 targets, not enough defenders. Classic divide and conquer. Jackie studied the tactical situation with growing concern. Derek had learned from their first encounter, adapting his approach from direct confrontation to strategic warfare. The community couldn't defend 7 locations simultaneously, which meant innocent people would suffer no matter what choices they made. There's something else, Bobby continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. Derek's got connections now. Professional muscle, not just street thugs. And he's talking about specialty business, moving people who won't be missed. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. This wasn't just about protection money or territorial control. Derek was planning to use their community as a base for human trafficking operations. Jenny suggested calling the police, but Pete shook his head grimly. Bobby says they got someone inside. Cops won't come until it's too late, if they come at all. Through the boarded windows, they could see Derek's expanded crew taking positions around the block. Professional criminals moved with the careful efficiency of people who killed for a living, not the sloppy enthusiasm of street thugs. At exactly 8 p.m., the phone rang. Derek's voice crackled through the speaker with mock politeness. You got 1 hour to clear out, Jackie. After that, everyone who helped you becomes fair game. The siege had begun in earnest. and Jackie faced the impossible mathematics of protecting 7 targets with 8 defenders against overwhelming odds at 9 p.m. sharp. Coordinated explosions of violence erupted across Chinatown as Derek's crew launched their carefully planned assault. Jackie heard the sounds of breaking glass and screams from 3 different directions, each cry for help pulling him toward an impossible choice. Golden Dragon Restaurant, Lynn's Herbal Shop, and Santos Market were under attack simultaneously. Jackie made a split-second tactical decision that would haunt him regardless of the outcome. He sent his volunteers to defend the businesses in pairs while taking the most dangerous target alone. At Golden Dragon, Mr. Wong and David Kim faced 3 attackers trying to burn the restaurant down with gasoline and Molotov cocktails. Wong's decades of kitchen experience served him well as he wielded hot oil like a weapon, forcing the arsonists to keep their distance while Kim used chairs and tables to create defensive barriers. Jackie arrived to find Wong defending his life's work with desperate creativity. The older man had turned his restaurant into a fortress, using everything from boiling water to kitchen knives to hold off professionally trained criminals who'd expected easy targets. The T. Santos Market, Maria and Frank Murphy barricaded themselves inside while attackers systematically destroyed the storefront. Frank's military experience from Vietnam showed as he turned the cramped space into a defensive position, using shelving units and product displays to create firing lanes and cover. Meanwhile, Jackie reached Lynn's Herbal Shop as 4 men systematically destroyed decades of work. They weren't just robbing. They were obliterating everything Mrs. Lynn had built, smashing irreplaceable medicines, and threatening the elderly woman with violence that went far beyond simple intimidation. Jackie's fury at seeing Mrs. Lynn terrorized unleashed something he'd kept carefully controlled. His combat became more aggressive, less restrained, as he moved through the shop like a force of nature. Ancient herbs scattered like snow as he used every surface as a weapon, every bottle as a projectile. The attackers were professionals, but they weren't prepared for Jackie's level of skill channeled through protective rage. He dismantled them with techniques that bordered on brutal, each strike precisely calculated to disable without killing, but without his usual restraint about causing pain. When the violence ended, Mrs. Lynn's life work lay in ruins around them. Rare herbs worth thousands of dollars, medicines for the community's elderly, traditional remedies that couldn't be replaced. Everything destroyed in minutes of calculated vandalism. Like T. Golden Dragon, Wong and Kim had saved the restaurant, but Wong suffered a broken arm when a Molotov cocktail exploded too close. Santos Market's windows were destroyed and inventory scattered, but Maria and Frank had held their ground through sheer determination. As Jackie surveyed the damage across all 3 locations, the tactical picture became clear. This had been a probe, Derek testing their defenses, learning their response patterns, identifying weaknesses for the real attacks still to come. The community had fought bravely and won this round, but victory felt hollow when weighed against the destruction and trauma. Derek had demonstrated that he could strike anywhere, anytime, and that Jackie couldn't be everywhere at once. The real war was just beginning. Derek watched the aftermath of the first wave from across the street, his frustration mounting as he realized Jackie's people had fought back more effectively than anticipated. Frank Kowalski arrived with 4 men who moved with the predatory confidence of professional killers, their eyes scanning the neighborhood like wolves evaluating prey. "Stop playing games," Frank said, lighting a cigarette with steady hands. "You want to break Jackie Chan? Challenge him to a straight fight. No more of this guerrilla warfare bullshit that's drawing attention we don't need." The 4 fighters Frank brought weren't street thugs. They were experienced criminals who understood violence as a craft. Marcus Webb, a heavyweight boxer who'd killed 2 men in unsanctioned fights. Tommy Rodriguez, a kickboxer who specialized in breaking bones for loan sharks. Jake Morrison, a wrestler who'd learned submission holds in military black sites. And Carlos Vega, a knife fighter whose scars told stories of survival in maximum security prisons. Jackie Chan's reputation was built in movies, Frank continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd orchestrated dozens of such operations. Time to see how the legend holds up against real killers who don't follow choreographed scripts. When they challenged Jackie to meet them at Golden Dragon, Jackie knew it was a trap but couldn't ignore it. The restaurant had become sacred ground, the place where Mr. Wong had risked everything to support him, where the community had made its first stand against Derek's terrorism. The confrontation began the moment Jackie entered the restaurant. Marcus Webb threw the first punch, a haymaker that would have decapitated most men. Jackie ducked under it and countered with an elbow strike that sent the boxer stumbling backward, blood streaming from his broken nose. Tommy Rodriguez attacked from the left with a series of kicks that showcased his professional training. Jackie absorbed the first kick on his forearm, redirected the second into a table, and used the third as leverage to launch himself into a spinning heel kick that dropped Rodriguez to his knees. The restaurant became a battlefield as Jackie faced opponents who understood how to kill efficiently. He used the narrow spaces between tables to prevent them from surrounding him, turning the familiar environment into a tactical advantage. Kitchen utensils became weapons. A spatula deflected a knife thrust. A rolling pin cracked ribs. Steam from the rice cooker obscured vision. Jake Morrison attempted a takedown that would have crushed Jackie's spine, but the martial arts master used the wrestler's momentum to drive him face-first into the industrial refrigerator. The impact left a dent in the steel door and Morrison unconscious on the linoleum floor. Carlos Vega was the most dangerous. His knife work displaying years of practice in situations where mistakes meant death. Jackie found himself pressed to his limits, using chopsticks to deflect blade strikes while searching for an opening that wouldn't come. The fight spilled into the kitchen, where Jackie used every surface as a weapon. Hot oil splashed across Carlos's face, creating the opening Jackie needed to disarm him with a technique that left the knife fighter's wrist bent at an unnatural angle. When the violence ended, all four professionals lay defeated, but the victory came at a cost. Jackie's ribs ached from impacts he couldn't completely avoid. A cut above his eye leaked blood into his vision, and his movements showed the subtle stiffness of someone no longer young enough to absorb punishment without consequence. The restaurant lay in ruins around them. Tables overturned, kitchen equipment destroyed, Mr. Wong's life work reduced to debris and broken dreams. Jackie helped the older man survey the wreckage, both of them understanding that Derek had proven his point that AS sirens approached in the distance. Derek's voice crackled through the restaurant's phone. "How do you like that warm-up, Jackie? Tomorrow, we stop playing games." The escalation Jackie had hoped to avoid was accelerating beyond his control, and innocent people were paying the price for his presence in their lives. Jenny found Jackie in his studio at dawn, applying ice to injuries that told the story of the previous night's battle. His movements were careful, deliberate, showing the accumulated damage of someone who could no longer bounce back from violence like he once had. "You can't keep this up," she said quietly, noting the way he favored his left side and the careful way he held his head. "They're going to kill you." Jackie's response was interrupted by a phone call that changed everything. Mrs. Nakamura's voice came through the speaker in a panic that transcended language barriers, her words tumbling over each other in a mixture of English and Japanese. "Tommy and Lisa didn't come home from school," she gasped. "They always come straight home. Always. Something's wrong." The cold dread that settled over Jackie was worse than any physical pain he'd endured. He and Jenny raced to Lincoln Elementary, where Principal Martinez confirmed their worst fears with the mechanical precision of someone delivering terrible news. Both children left with a man claiming to be Lisa's uncle, she explained, checking her notes with shaking hands. Tall, blonde, said there was a family emergency. Lisa seemed confused but didn't want to make a scene. Jackie's mind processed the tactical implications with sickening clarity. Derek had escalated beyond property damage and intimidation. He'd moved to the one form of leverage that no decent person could resist. The children weren't just victims anymore. They were weapons pointed directly at Jackie's heart. Derek's call came exactly 1 hour later, his voice sickeningly cheerful as it crackled through Jackie's phone. "Hope you don't have any plans for the next few days, Jackie. Tommy and Lisa are going on a little trip." The threat was clear without being explicit: child trafficking. Derek had connections to networks that moved children across international borders, selling them to buyers whose intentions were too horrific to voice directly. "Here's how this works," Derek continued, enjoying every word. "You leave Chinatown tonight. Get on a bus, train, plane, whatever. Just disappear forever. Or Tommy and Lisa disappear into a network where cute Asian kids bring premium prices from. overseas customers. The parents' anguish broke Jackie's heart in ways that physical violence never could. Mrs. Nakamura collapsed in her husband's arms, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to tear something fundamental in the universe. Carlos Torres paced like a caged animal, his construction workers' hands clenched into fists with nowhere to direct their fury. "We have to call the police," Carlos demanded, his voice raw with desperation. "FBI, immigration, somebody has to help." But Bobby Valdez, still hiding with their group, shook his head with the certainty of someone who'd seen Derek's connections firsthand. "He's got people everywhere. Cops get involved. Those kids disappear permanently. No witnesses, no evidence, no bodies to find." Jackie faced the impossible mathematics of heroism: save 2 innocent children or protect an entire community from Derek's future predations. Every principle he'd lived by, every lesson he'd taught about protecting the weak, came down to this moment, standing in his destroyed studio, surrounded by parents whose trust he'd failed and community members who'd sacrificed everything to follow him. Jackie made the hardest decision of his life. "I'll leave tonight," he said quietly, the words feeling like glass in his throat. The community's last hope was walking away, and everyone in the room understood that Derek had found the one weapon that could defeat even Jackie Chan, the innocence of children held hostage against a good man's conscience. Jackie packed his few belongings into a worn duffel bag, while Jenny pleaded with him to reconsider. "There has to be another way. You can't just abandon everyone who believed in you." Outside, community members gathered in silent vigil, watching their protector prepare to leave. Some came to show support, others to witness the end of hope, but all understood they were watching something fundamental die in their neighborhood. The reaction split along predictable lines. Mr. Wong, his arms still in a sling from defending his restaurant, refused to speak to Jackie directly. His disappointment was more painful than Derek's violence. The betrayal of someone who'd sacrificed everything only to watch his champion surrender to Mrs. Lin brought tea and pressed a jade amulet into Jackie's hands. "For protection," she whispered, in broken English, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "And for remembering that you tried." The hardest goodbye was to the children's parents, who oscillated between desperate hope that Jackie's sacrifice would save their kids and bitter anger that it had come to this. Mrs. Nakamura couldn't even look at him, while Carlos Torres grabbed Jackie's shoulders with desperate intensity. "Promise me," Carlos demanded, his voice breaking. "Promise me this isn't for nothing. Promise me my little girl comes home." Jackie couldn't make that promise, and his silence said everything to the bus station. Jenny made one final plea. "What if Derek doesn't release them? What if this is all for nothing?" Her question voiced Jackie's deepest fear, that he was trading his principles for empty promises from a sociopath who'd never intended to honor any deal. "Then I'll have failed in the most important way possible," Jackie replied, shouldering his bag with the weight of defeat. As Jackie's bus pulled away from Chinatown, Derek appeared on Grant Avenue like a conquering general. His expanded crew spread through the streets with the arrogance of occupying soldiers, no longer hiding their intentions or identities. Derek set up headquarters in Jackie's former studio, the symbolism deliberate and complete. He announced his victory through a bullhorn, his voice echoing off buildings where families cowered behind locked doors. "Jackie Chan has left the building," Derek shouted, his crew laughing and cheering. "This neighborhood belongs to me now. Anyone who wants to do business here goes through me." The celebration was premature. Derek had made 2 crucial errors in his moment of triumph. First, his drunken boasting to Frank Kowalski revealed more about the children's location than he'd intended. Second, he'd assumed that Jackie Chan would actually stay on that bus. Derek's victory party continued through the night, fueled by alcohol and the intoxicating rush of defeating a legend. But legends don't die easily, and some promises are worth breaking when innocent lives hang in the balance point. 20 miles outside the city, Jackie watched the bus station disappear through the rear window. The other passengers dozed or read, unaware they were traveling with someone who'd just made the hardest decision of his life. But Jackie had learned something important during his years in Hollywood. Sometimes the best way to win is to let your enemy think they've already won. Derek thought he'd destroyed Jackie Chan, but he'd actually freed him from the constraints of trying to protect everyone at once. The real fight was about to begin. Frank Kowalski met with Derek in the converted studio, surveying the spray-painted walls and broken equipment with the eye of someone who understood that successful criminal enterprises required subtlety, not spectacle. "This is drawing too much attention," Frank said, lighting a cigarette, while Derek counted money taken from intimidated business owners. "Child trafficking brings federal heat. This was supposed to be a simple protection racket." Derek, drunk on power and whiskey, had lost all sense of proportion. He bragged about the trafficking network he was connecting with, the money they'd make selling children to overseas buyers, his plans to expand operations beyond Chinatown into other vulnerable communities. "Do you know what kind of reputation I'll have?" Derek slurred, waving a bottle for emphasis. "The man who broke Jackie Chan and built an empire on his grave. Every punk in the city will want to work for me." Frank realized Derek had become a liability, too unstable, too visible, too dangerous to the larger criminal organization that depended on operating below law enforcement's radar. Derek's public victory celebration had been broadcast on social media, tagged with hashtag #JackieChanDefeated, drawing exactly the kind of attention that destroyed careful criminal enterprises. Frank made a calculated decision. He contacted his police sources, different from Derek's corrupt councilman, and arranged for Derek's crew to be arrested on weapons charges during a coordinated raid. "Nothing personal," Frank told Derek as sirens approached the studio. "But you've become bad for business." Derek's paranoia had anticipated this betrayal. As Frank's takedown unfolded, Derek discovered that Frank had underestimated him just as badly as he'd underestimated Jackie. The children weren't where Derek had claimed they'd be. He'd moved them to a secondary location and arranged insurance against exactly this kind of double-cross that Frank's men found themselves arresting Derek's expendable crew while Derek himself escaped through storm drains he'd mapped weeks earlier. From a payphone 6 blocks away, Derek called Frank with the voice of someone who'd always been 3 moves ahead. "Congratulations, you just played yourself." Derek laughed into the phone. "Jackie's dead in a bus crash I arranged. The kids are insurance for my escape, and you're holding an empty bag when the feds come looking for missing children." The bus crash was Derek's masterstroke, eliminating Jackie while creating the perfect cover story for his own disappearance. News reports described a mountain highway accident with no survivors, and Derek's confederates in the transportation company had ensured Jackie's name appeared on the passenger manifest. Frank realized he'd been outmaneuvered by a sociopath whose paranoia had been mistaken for stupidity. 2 innocent children were now in the hands of human traffickers because of his power grab. Federal investigators would soon be asking questions he couldn't answer, and Derek had vanished like smoke. The trafficking network Derek had contacted operated with industrial efficiency. Children disappeared into shipping containers and international networks where they'd never be found. Tommy and Lisa had perhaps hours before they'd be moved beyond any possibility of rescue. As Frank sat in Derek's abandoned studio, surrounded by evidence of his failed coup, he understood that he'd created something worse than Derek's chaotic evil. He'd given a true monster the motivation and resources to disappear forever while taking innocent lives with him. The game had changed completely, and everyone had lost except Derek. The bus crash scene was a nightmare of twisted metal and emergency lights. Investigators moving through wreckage like grim archaeologists piecing together the final moments of 17 lives. News reporters confirmed that action star Jackie Chan was among the victims, his name appearing on passenger manifests that Derek's contacts had carefully fabricated in Chinatown. The community mourned with the hollow despair of people who'd lost their last hope. Shop owners peered fearfully from behind curtains as Derek's remaining crew celebrated in the streets, their victory seeming absolute and permanent. But Jackie wasn't on that bus. Years of stunt work had taught him to think 3 moves ahead, and Derek's paranoia had been too obvious to miss. Jackie had switched transportation at the first stop, purchasing a ticket on a different bus while leaving his original seat to a hitchhiker who'd accepted the favor gratefully. When radio reports described the crash, Jackie felt the weight of that stranger's death, another innocent victim of Derek's escalating madness. Using survival skills learned from 3 decades of death-defying sequences, Jackie approached Chinatown unseen. Storm drains became highways, abandoned buildings provided cover, and his knowledge of urban environments from countless film locations guided him through the city's forgotten spaces. His death provided the perfect cover for investigation without surveillance. Derek's crew had relaxed their vigilance, confident that their primary threat was eliminated. This overconfidence created opportunities that Jackie exploited with the patience of someone who understood that revenge was a dish best served with surgical precision. Jenny organized the community's grief, but she refused to believe Jackie would abandon the children, even in death. Her faith was rewarded when she found Mrs. Lynn's jade amulet left on her windowsill, the same protective charm the elderly woman had given Jackie. The message was clear. Reports of his death had been greatly exaggerated, using techniques learned from spy films and real military advisors who'd consulted on his movies. Jackie infiltrated Derek's abandoned safe houses. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. This wasn't just about Chinatown anymore. That Derek's operation connected to a trafficking network that moved children throughout the West Coast, using legitimate businesses as fronts and corrupt officials as protection. Shipping manifests showed regular cargo movements to overseas destinations, and financial records revealed payments that could only represent human sales. The children's location wasn't in Chinatown at all. They were being held at a warehouse complex near the Oakland docks, part of a larger operation that processed dozens of victims monthly. Tommy and Lisa were just two more items in an inventory of stolen lives. Jackie also learned that Derek planned to eliminate Frank Kowalski that very night, tying up loose ends before fleeing to Mexico with enough money to disappear forever. The trafficking network would provide new identities and international connections, ensuring Derek could continue his predations anywhere in the world. Jackie faced a tactical dilemma that required splitting his focus. Save Frank Kowalski, not out of mercy, but because Frank possessed intelligence about the trafficking network that might save other children beyond Tommy and Lisa, or focus entirely on the rescue mission. Time was running out for both objectives. The children would be moved to a ship bound for Southeast Asia within hours, where they'd disappear forever into markets that treated children as commodities. Frank's execution was scheduled for midnight, eliminating the one person who might provide crucial intelligence about the network's structure and operations. Jackie made his choice with the cold calculation of someone who'd learned that heroism sometimes required impossible decisions. He would save Frank first, extract the intelligence needed to destroy the entire network, then rescue Tommy and Lisa before they could be moved. But Derek's paranoia had prepared for exactly this kind of interference. The warehouse wasn't just a holding facility. It was a trap designed to capture anyone brave enough to attempt a rescue. Jackie was walking into a maze designed by a madman who'd had weeks to prepare for this exact confrontation. The real battle was about to begin, and Jackie was no longer bound by the constraints of protecting innocent bystanders. In Derek's world of absolute evil, Jackie could finally unleash the full scope of his abilities without restraint. Jackie found Frank Kowalski in an abandoned parking garage, bleeding from a gunshot wound, while Derek's assassins closed in for the kill. The rescue was brutal and efficient. Jackie's combat style had evolved from defensive to aggressively tactical, shaped by grief over what he believed was his failure to protect the children. Frank's execution team consisted of 3 professionals who'd killed for money rather than passion, making them predictable in ways that Derek's chaotic crew hadn't been. Jackie used the garage's concrete pillars and parked cars as cover, moving through shadows like a predator who'd finally embraced his lethal potential. The first assassin died from a neck strike that crushed his windpipe, a technique Jackie had learned for movies but never used with lethal intent. The second fell to a combination that shattered ribs and punctured a lung, dropping him silently behind a rusted sedan. The third managed to fire 2 shots before Jackie's response ended his participation permanently. Frank clutched his wounded shoulder, staring at Jackie with the amazement of someone witnessing his own salvation. "You're supposed to be dead," he gasped, blood seeping between his fingers. "Deaths have been greatly exaggerated," Jackie replied, applying pressure to Frank's wound with practiced efficiency. "But yours will be very real if you don't start talking. Where are the children?" Frank's intelligence proved invaluable despite his criminal nature. The trafficking operation used a network of warehouses along the Oakland waterfront, moving children every 48 hours to avoid detection. Tommy and Lisa were being held at Pier 47, but they'd be loaded onto a container ship bound for Southeast Asia within hours. The network has buyers waiting overseas, Frank explained, his voice weakening from blood loss. Kids disappear forever once they're moved internationally. No rescue, no recovery, no hope. Frank also revealed Derek's escape plan and the scope of his betrayal. He's not just fleeing. He's planning to burn down your studio with Jenny and the community leaders inside. Final message about what happens to people who oppose him. Jackie's blood ran cold as he realized Derek's endgame involved eliminating witnesses while making his escape. The community that had supported Jackie would pay the ultimate price for their loyalty, and Jenny would die for the crime of believing in justice. I can get you inside that warehouse, Frank offered, his voice desperate with the need for redemption. Got contacts in the trafficking network, access codes, guard schedules. But you gotta promise me something. When this is over, make sure I disappear somewhere Derek can never find me. Jackie agreed to the bargain, understanding that Frank's knowledge was worth more than moral purity when children's lives hung in the balance. Frank's contacts provided detailed intelligence about the warehouse complex, security rotations, camera blind spots, the specific building where high-value inventory was held before shipment. The facility was designed like a fortress, with multiple layers of security and guards who shot first and never bothered with questions. Professional criminals protected an operation worth millions annually, and they had standing orders to eliminate any interference permanently. But Frank's intelligence revealed a weakness. The trafficking operation depended on maintaining the appearance of legitimate business. The warehouses operated under cover of import-export companies, which meant security had to appear normal to casual observation. This constraint limited their weapons and visibility, creating opportunities for someone skilled enough to exploit them. Jackie called Jenny using Frank's phone, warning her to evacuate everyone from Chinatown immediately. But Jenny's response revealed the depth of her transformation from victim to leader. If we run now, he wins forever, she said, her voice carrying newfound steel. Not just here, but everywhere he goes next. The community has decided we're making our stand. Jackie realized that Derek's war had created something unexpected, a community that had found its courage and refused to be driven away by fear. But courage without tactical advantage was just noble suicide, and Derek's final assault would be overwhelming. The warehouse infiltration would require every skill Jackie had learned from 30 years of stunts, fights, and death-defying sequences. But even if he succeeded in rescuing Tommy and Lisa, he might return to find Chinatown in ashes and everyone he cared about dead. Time was running out on multiple fronts, and Jackie faced the impossible mathematics of being in two places at once. Using Frank's criminal contacts, Jackie gained entry to the warehouse district disguised as a potential buyer interested in the trafficking operation's specialty inventory. The role required him to project casual cruelty that violated everything he believed in, but the children's lives demanded whatever sacrifices were necessary. The warehouse complex sprawled across 6 city blocks, a maze of legitimate businesses, hiding illegal operations with industrial efficiency. Jackie mapped security patterns while maintaining his cover, identifying guard rotations and camera blind spots with the tactical awareness of someone whose life had depended on understanding dangerous environments. Frank's intelligence proved accurate. The trafficking operation was larger and more organized than anyone had imagined. Dozens of victims were being processed simultaneously, not just Tommy and Lisa, guarded by professional criminals with military-grade weapons and the casual brutality of people who viewed human suffering as overhead expenses. Derek's command center occupied the central warehouse, surrounded by layers of security that would challenge even Jackie's legendary abilities. Computer screens tracked inventory movements, financial transactions, and shipping schedules with the cold efficiency of any legitimate business. The only difference was that the cargo consisted of stolen lives. Jenny's community defense preparations in Chinatown had taken on unexpected effectiveness. Instead of evacuating, the shop owners and residents had organized the neighborhood's final stand with tactical precision that surprised even Jackie. Pete Kowalski's delivery truck friends created mobile barricades. Maria Santos contacted her extended family for reinforcements, and even Mr. Wong appeared with his arm in a sling, carrying a cleaver with determined purpose. The community that had seemed helpless just days ago had found strength in unity. But Jackie knew their courage would be overwhelmed by Derek's professional killers. Through warehouse windows, he could see smoke rising from Chinatown's direction. Derek's final assault had begun while Jackie was miles away. Jackie's infiltration was discovered when a guard recognized him despite his disguise. Apparently, Jackie Chan's face was too famous to hide among criminals who watched movies during their downtime. Alarms screamed throughout the complex as Jackie's cover evaporated like morning mist. The warehouse became a battleground as Jackie fought toward the children's location, using everything from forklift trucks to shipping containers as weapons and obstacles. His combat style adapted to the industrial environment. Cables became whips, pipes transformed into staffs, and his knowledge of construction sites from film work helped him navigate the maze-like interior. Each victory came at the cost of precious time he didn't have. Tommy and Lisa's voices calling for help guided him through the complex. But as he got closer, Jackie realized the voices were being broadcast through speakers. Another layer of Derek's paranoid trap. Security guards fell to precise strikes that disabled without killing, but their radios crackled with reports of Jackie's progress. Derek was tracking his movement through the facility, using the complex's design to channel him toward a predetermined confrontation. The children weren't just hidden. They were bait in a trap that Derek had spent weeks perfecting. Every corridor led deeper into the warehouse's heart. Every victory brought Jackie closer to the final confrontation that Derek had been planning since their first encounter. Jackie's phone buzzed with a text message that stopped him cold. A photo of Chinatown burning, sent from Derek's location. The community that had found its courage was paying the price for Jackie's attempt to save two children, and Derek's message was clear. Heroes always face impossible choices. But Jackie had learned something during his years of performing death-defying stunts. Sometimes, the only way to survive impossible situations was to do something so unexpected that even careful plans couldn't account for it. The warehouse's sprinkler system activated under Jackie's sabotage, flooding the facility with enough water to short-circuit security systems and create chaos among guards who'd been depending on technology to track their target. In the confusion, Jackie moved toward the children's real location with the certainty of someone who'd finally stopped playing by Derek's rules. Jackie navigated the flooded warehouse complex like a force of nature, using the chaos from the activated sprinkler system to his tactical advantage. The facility had been designed as a maze to confuse intruders, but Derek had underestimated Jackie's ability to adapt to environments that defied conventional navigation. Corridors led to dead ends fitted with hidden cameras that tracked every movement. Doors locked automatically behind intruders, creating a one-way path toward whatever Derek had prepared. The entire complex was a machine designed to capture and eliminate anyone brave enough to attempt a rescue. Jackie used his extensive knowledge of how buildings were constructed to find passages that didn't appear on any blueprint. Ventilation systems became highways, support beams provided climbing routes between levels, and his understanding of structural engineering revealed shortcuts through walls that appeared solid but were actually decorative facades. The warehouse wasn't just a holding facility. It was Derek's monument to paranoid genius, every surface designed to channel attackers toward predetermined kill zones. But Jackie's movie experience had taught him to think in 3 dimensions, using vertical space and unconventional routes that Derek's ground-level thinking hadn't anticipated. He encountered guards at regular intervals, each engagement revealing more about the facility's true purpose. These weren't just warehouse workers. They were experienced killers who understood violence as a profession, armed with weapons that belonged in war zones rather than commercial districts. Jackie defeated them using improvised weapons and environmental hazards, but each victory revealed the scope of what he was fighting against. Computer terminals showed shipping manifests for human cargo, financial records documenting payments for children sold like livestock, and communication logs with buyers whose requests were too horrific to fully comprehend. The voices calling for help that had guided him through the maze suddenly stopped, replaced by Derek's laughter echoing from speakers throughout the complex. Jackie realized he'd been following recorded audio, led deeper into the warehouse by sounds that existed only to manipulate his protective instincts. But the silence also revealed something else. Real voices, barely audible, coming from a section of the warehouse that wasn't on Derek's guided tour. Tommy and Lisa were calling for their teacher, their voices weak but unmistakably genuine. Jackie found them in a shipping container modified for human transport, the interior fitted with restraints and monitoring equipment that spoke to the trafficking network's industrial efficiency. Tommy and Lisa were physically unharmed but emotionally traumatized, their 8 and 10-year-old minds struggling to process the adult evil they'd encountered. Mr. Lee. Tommy's voice carried desperate relief as Jackie cut their restraints with bolt cutters taken from a defeated guard. We knew you'd come. We knew you wouldn't leave us. Lisa's courage had kept Tommy calm during their captivity, her 10-year-old determination proving stronger than Derek's psychological warfare. The bad man said you were dead, she told Jackie as he lifted them both to safety. But I told Tommy, you were too smart to die from a stupid bus crash. Their rescue felt like victory until Derek's voice crackled through the container's communication system, his tone carrying the satisfaction of someone whose trap had finally been sprung. Welcome to the main event, Jackie. Derek's voice echoed from speakers built into the container walls. Hope you enjoyed the warm-up, because now we finish what we started in that alley. The container's doors slammed shut with hydraulic finality, sealing Jackie and the children inside a steel box that immediately began filling with something that smelled like gasoline. Derek's final trap wasn't just designed to kill. It was meant to create a funeral pyre that would eliminate all evidence of his trafficking operation. But Derek had made one crucial error in his paranoid planning. He'd assumed Jackie would attempt a conventional rescue, fighting through the facility toward a predictable confrontation. Instead, Jackie had brought something Derek couldn't plan for: bolt cutters powerful enough to cut through container walls and the tactical experience to recognize escape routes that existed outside Derek's carefully constructed maze. The real confrontation was about to begin, but not in the location or manner that Derek had spent weeks preparing for. Jackie tore through the container wall with bolt cutters, creating an escape route while the gasoline fumes thickened around them. Tommy and Lisa clung to his sides as he lifted them through the jagged opening, their small bodies trembling with fear but trusting completely in their teacher's ability to save them. The warehouse's main floor stretched before them like an industrial cathedral, filled with shipping containers and heavy machinery that cast deep shadows under flickering fluorescent lights. Derek stood in the center, no longer the street punk who dragged Jenny through an alley, but something far more dangerous, a predator who'd tasted power and found it intoxicating. Impressive, Jackie, Derek called out, his voice echoing off concrete walls. But you're too late to save anyone else. Your precious community is already burning. Derek held up his phone, showing live video from Chinatown where flames consumed the buildings Jackie had tried to protect. Jenny's face appeared on the screen, surrounded by smoke as she helped evacuate families from burning shops. The community's courage had saved lives, but Derek's revenge was methodical and complete. Here's the deal, Derek continued, pulling Tommy and Lisa behind a wall of shipping containers with casual brutality. You want these kids? Come and take them. But know that every second you waste here, more of your friends are dying. Jackie approached with the measured pace of someone who'd spent decades calculating risks and finding solutions where none seemed to exist. The warehouse floor was Derek's chosen battlefield, but Jackie understood that environments could be weapons when used with sufficient creativity. Derek had equipped himself with traditional weapons from Jackie's own studio: a bow staff, throwing stars, and nunchucks taken during the destruction of the martial arts school. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Derek would use Jackie's own tools to destroy everything the master had built. I figured we should do this properly, Derek snarled, spinning the nunchucks with surprising competence. Kung Fu master versus street fighter, winner takes all. The fight began with Derek's aggressive assault, his movements powered by rage and desperation rather than technique. He swung the bow staff like a baseball bat, aiming for Jackie's skull with enough force to shatter bone. Jackie deflected the attack with his forearm, the impact sending shock waves through both combatants. Derek's style was brutal but undisciplined, using the weapons with raw power rather than finesse. He threw the stars with deadly accuracy, forcing Jackie to dodge and weave through the warehouse's maze of equipment. The nunchucks became extensions of Derek's fury, whipping through the air with enough speed to break ribs. Jackie's response was poetry written in violence. He used the warehouse's industrial environment as an extension of his body. Conveyor belts became platforms for aerial attacks. Hanging chains provided leverage for momentum, and the concrete floor became a weapon. When Derek's body met it at high velocity, the contrast between their fighting styles told the story of two different philosophies. Derek fought with the savage desperation of someone who viewed violence as dominance, while Jackie moved with the fluid precision of someone who understood combat as protection elevated to art. When Derek threatened to harm the children mid-fight, Jackie's restraint finally broke. The techniques he'd kept hidden for decades emerged, not the movie-safe choreography of his films, but the real martial arts designed to disable opponents quickly and permanently. Derek found himself outmatched by someone whose true abilities had been concealed behind entertainment and showmanship. Jackie's strikes targeted pressure points that Derek didn't know existed. His throws used leverage that seemed to defy physics, and his speed increased rather than decreased as the fight progressed. "You want to know the difference between us, Derek?" Jackie said as he systematically dismantled his opponent's defenses. "You fight because you enjoy hurting people. I fight because I have to." Derek's response was to grab a gasoline can and threaten to immolate everyone in the warehouse. "If I can't win, nobody wins," he screamed, producing a lit cigarette lighter with shaking hands. But Derek's desperation had made him sloppy. Jackie recognized the threat and responded with a perfect, disarming technique. The lighter flew across the warehouse. The gasoline can was knocked from Derek's hands, and Derek himself was subdued with a sleeper hold that rendered him unconscious without permanent damage. As sirens finally arrived, real police this time, not Derek's corrupt contacts. Jackie untied Tommy and Lisa, who rushed into his arms with the desperate relief of children who'd survived a nightmare. The warehouse, left leaderless, collapsed as federal agents conducted simultaneous raids across the city. Frank Kowalski's intelligence had provided the evidence needed to destroy the entire trafficking network, saving countless future victims from Derek's industrial evil. Outside the warehouse, Jackie emerged carrying Tommy and Lisa into the pre-dawn light, where their parents waited with tears of joy and relief. The children were safe, Derek was defeated, and the trafficking network was being systematically dismantled by authorities who finally had the evidence they needed. But victory felt incomplete until Jackie could return to Chinatown and learn the fate of the dawn broke over the warehouse district as federal agents processed the largest human trafficking bust in West Coast history. Jackie emerged carrying Tommy and Lisa, their small bodies clinging to him with the desperate relief of children who'd survived a nightmare beyond their years' misses. Nakamura and Carlos Torres waited in the parking area, their faces transformed by emotions too powerful for words. The reunion was everything Jackie had hoped for: tears of joy, desperate hugs, and the kind of gratitude that transcended language. Tommy buried his face in his mother's shoulder while Lisa whispered reassurances to her father in rapid Spanish. "The children are safe," Jackie told the parents. But his eyes searched the horizon where smoke still rose from Chinatown's direction. "But I need to get back to the community." Agent Sarah Chun, the federal investigator coordinating the raids, approached Jackie with professional respect tempered by obvious admiration. "Mr. Chan, we've been tracking this trafficking network for 2 years without a breakthrough. Your actions tonight saved dozens of children and gave us the evidence needed to dismantle a multi-million-dollar operation." Derek's unconscious form was loaded into an ambulance under heavy guard, his empire of fear reduced to the pathetic sight of a broken man being wheeled away on a stretcher. The trafficking network's leadership faced federal charges that would ensure they never saw freedom again, and their overseas connections were being systematically identified and eliminated. But Frank Kowalski provided the most satisfying news of all. "Derek won't be a problem for anyone," he told Jackie while federal marshals prepared to escort him into witness protection. "Word travels fast in prison. Inmates don't tolerate crimes against children. He'll be dead within a week, whether he's in general population or protective custody." The drive back to Chinatown revealed both destruction and resilience. Several buildings showed fire damage, and broken windows told stories of violence. But the community had survived Derek's final assault with fewer casualties than anyone had dared hope. Jenny stood in the middle of Grand Avenue, directing cleanup efforts with the natural leadership that crisis had revealed. Her face was streaked with soot and exhaustion, but her voice carried the authority of someone who discovered her true calling in the midst of chaos. The community fought back, she told Jackie as he surveyed the damage. Pete's delivery trucks blocked the arsonist's escape routes. Maria's family provided enough reinforcements to turn the tide, and Mr. Wong. She smiled despite her exhaustion. Mr. Wong took down 3 professional killers with nothing but kitchen knives and 40 years of prep cook experience. The elderly restaurant owner emerged from his damaged but standing establishment, his arms still in a sling but his dignity intact. "Jackie," he said simply, then bowed with the formal respect of someone acknowledging a debt that could never be repaid to Mrs. Lin's herb shop had suffered the worst damage, but the elderly woman was already sorting through salvageable medicines, with the determination of someone who'd rebuilt her life before and would do so again. When she saw Jackie, her weathered face crumpled with relief. "The children?" she asked in her broken English. "Safe," Jackie replied, and Mrs. Lin's tears spoke volumes about the weight they'd all carried. Councilman Bradley's arrest had been broadcast on every news channel, his corruption exposed, and his political career destroyed. The police response to Chinatown would be immediate and legitimate from now on, ensuring that another Derek Sullivan couldn't terrorize the community through official negligence. The victory was bittersweet. Several community members had been injured defending their neighborhood. Businesses were damaged, and everyone carried psychological scars from Derek's campaign of terror. But something fundamental had changed in Chinatown's character. "We're not the same people who were afraid yesterday," Jenny told Jackie as they walked through streets where neighbors helped neighbors without being asked. "Derek wanted to break us, but he accidentally showed us what we could become when we stood together." The morning brought federal investigators, insurance adjusters, and news crews, all trying to document and quantify what couldn't be measured. How do you calculate the value of a community that discovers its courage? How do you assess the worth of children who sleep safely because monsters have been defeated? Jackie stood in his damaged studio, surrounded by broken mirrors and scattered equipment, but also by parents who brought their children for classes that wouldn't resume for weeks. They came not for martial arts instruction, but to be near someone who'd proven that heroes still existed in a world that often forgot the difference between right and wrong. The nightmare was over, but the real work of rebuilding was just beginning. 3 months later, Jackie stood in his rebuilt studio, watching a class of 25 children practice defensive moves with the focused attention that comes from understanding why such skills matter. The studio was larger now, funded by community donations, and an anonymous benefactor rumored to be one of Jackie's Hollywood colleagues who'd learned about the crisis through news coverage. The expansion reflected Chinatown's transformation. What had begun as a neighborhood under siege had become a model for community resilience that attracted positive attention from across the country. Tours buses brought visitors who wanted to see where Jackie Chan had fought to protect ordinary families, and new businesses opened to serve the increased foot traffic. Tommy Nakamura and Lisa Torres had not only recovered from their trauma but emerged as natural leaders among their peers. They helped newer students overcome their fears while demonstrating techniques with precision that would have been impressive in adult practitioners. The experience had aged them beyond their years, but also given them confidence that would serve them throughout their lives. Mr. Lee taught us that martial arts isn't about fighting, Lisa explained to a group of first-time students, her 10-year-old voice carrying wisdom earned through surviving genuine evil. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves. The studio's expansion included counseling services and community programs that addressed the psychological aftermath of Derek's campaign. Jenny had graduated nursing school and opened a community health clinic, using skills learned during the crisis to help neighbors access health care they couldn't afford elsewhere. Mr. Wong's Golden Dragon restaurant was busier than ever, featured in travel guides as the place where an elderly immigrant helped Jackie Chan save Chinatown. Wong had hired 3 additional staff members and expanded his menu, but he still remembered every regular customer's preferences and asked about their families. Mrs. Lin's herb shop had been rebuilt with modern security systems and a larger inventory, but she maintained the traditional atmosphere that made it a community gathering place. Her knowledge of pressure points had become legendary among the children, who viewed her as Jackie's secret weapon disguised as a harmless grandmother. The most profound change was in the community's self-perception. Where once there had been fear and isolation, there was now confidence and connection. Neighborhood watch programs operated with military efficiency. Business owners coordinated their schedules to ensure mutual support, and newcomers were integrated into the community's protective network within days of arrival. Jackie received a visit from Frank Kowalski, now living under federal protection after his testimony had demolished the entire trafficking network. Frank brought news that Derek had indeed died in prison, killed by inmates who'd learned about his crimes against children and decided that justice required their personal intervention. "Figured you'd want to know it's really over," Frank said, his face showing the marks of someone who'd chosen redemption but would carry guilt forever. "The network's been completely dismantled. No more children will suffer because of what we started." Jackie nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor regret, just relief that a threat had been permanently eliminated. "What will you do now?" "Disappear somewhere warm and try to forget I was ever Frank Kowalski," Frank replied. "Maybe find a way to help kids instead of hurting them. If anyone will let an ex-criminal near something that pure." That evening, Jackie joined the community for a celebration in Portsmouth Square, but this wasn't a celebration of violence. It was a recognition of what they'd built together after the violence ended. The festival showcased how completely the neighborhood had transformed, with cultural performances, food vendors, and families enjoying public spaces without fear. Ginny approached Jackie with news that would test his commitment to the community. He'd helped save. "I've been accepted to a pediatric nursing program in Los Angeles," she said, her voice carrying excitement and uncertainty in equal measure. "Full scholarship, guaranteed placement at Children's Hospital." Jackie waited for her decision, understanding that his answer would reveal whether he'd truly learned to let people choose their own paths. "I'm staying," Ginny continued, her smile illuminating the evening darkness. "This is where I'm needed. These people, this place. It's become my family in ways I never expected." Her words echoed Jackie's own transformation from isolated celebrity to community protector, proving that heroism was contagious when given proper conditions to flourish. 1 year later, Jackie led a demonstration at the annual Chinatown Street Festival, his students showcasing martial arts techniques that emphasized protection over aggression. The crowd included city officials, former students who'd gone on to college, and families who'd moved to Chinatown specifically for the sense of safety and community that had become the neighborhood's defining characteristic. The festival represented complete transformation. Where once there had been fear and isolation, there was now celebration and connection. Vendors sold food and crafts. Children played in streets that had once been dangerous, and visitors from around the world came to see the place where in action. Star had become a real hero. The martial arts demonstration was followed by speeches from community leaders, but the most powerful moment came when Tommy Nakamura and Lisa Torres, now confident teenagers, led a group of younger children in a kata that emphasized the philosophy Jackie had taught them. "Martial arts is about protecting what matters," Tommy announced to the crowd, his 13-year-old voice carrying the authority of someone who'd learned these lessons through experience rather than theory. "We train so we never have to fight. But if we must protect others, we use only what is necessary." Jackie's influence had spread far beyond Chinatown. Police departments were using his community defense model in other neighborhoods. Social workers were replicating his approach to helping trauma survivors through martial arts training, and child protection agencies had adopted his methods for identifying and disrupting trafficking networks. But for Jackie, the greatest success was simpler. Children played safely in the streets. Shop owners smiled at customers without fear, and neighbors helped each other without being asked. The community had learned that courage was contagious and that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when they stood together. Mayor Patricia Williams presented Jackie with a key to the city, but he accepted it on behalf of the entire community. "I only reminded you of what was already there," he told the gathered crowd. "Courage isn't something you learn, it's something you choose." As the festival continued into the evening, Jackie walked through streets that bore no resemblance to the fearful neighborhood he'd found 2 years earlier. Mrs. Lin taught Ginny traditional medicine to complement her nursing skills. Pete Kowalski had started his own delivery company with trucks that doubled as community emergency vehicles, and Maria Santos had opened a second market that employed teenagers from Jackie's martial arts program. The transformation extended to the next generation. Children who'd been traumatized by Derek's terrorism had grown into teenagers who volunteered at community centers, helped elderly neighbors with daily tasks, and served as mentors for younger kids facing their own challenges. That Jackie's studio had become the heart of something larger than martial arts instruction. It was a community center, a counseling facility, a place where people learned not just to defend themselves, but to care for each other. The walls displayed photographs of graduations, weddings, and achievements by students who'd found confidence through their training. The evening ended with Jackie in his studio at dawn, moving through a slow kata as sunlight streamed through windows that no longer needed to be boarded up. Chinatown was awake, alive, and safe, and the legend of Jackie Chan had found its most important chapter not on a movie screen, but in the real lives of people who'd learned that heroes weren't mythical figures. They were ordinary people who chose to protect what mattered. The final scene showed the neighborhood in full morning bustle. Children walking to school without fear, shop owners opening their doors with confidence, and neighbors greeting each other with the warmth that comes from having survived something terrible together and emerged stronger. Jackie Chan had come to Chinatown seeking peace and found something better, purpose that would last the rest of his life. The community had given him more than he'd given them: a family, a home, and proof that some victories are worth any sacrifice. In the distance, Tommy and Lisa could be seen leading a group of younger children to Jackie's studio for their morning class, their voices carrying across the morning air as they discussed the day's lesson plan with the serious attention of young people who understood that what they were learning was about much more than martial arts. The legend continued, not in theaters or on screens, but in the daily acts of courage performed by ordinary people who'd learned that protecting others was the highest calling anyone could answer. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.